The world you see before your eyes is not the cause of anything that happens in your life. It is the mirror that only reflects what has already been imagined, assumed, and felt within you. To look at it as if it had power over you is to misunderstand the law of life. The outer world is clay, molded by the inner convictions you carry in silence. When a man gazes at his reflection in a mirror, he does not blame the mirror for the expression on his face, for he knows it is his own face being reflected back. Yet in daily life, most people rage against circumstances, curse their conditions, and try to alter shadows rather than the source. The truth is simple but demanding. What you see is only the evidence of what you have assumed in your imagination. It is an afterimage, a result. The cause is invisible, silent, and personal. It begins within. To recognize this is to reclaim dominion. You are never a victim of what appears on the surface, no matter how overwhelming it seems. The truth of life is that appearances are only effects. If you take them as facts with final authority, you become enslaved to them. But if you dare to regard them as shadows, you begin to see their impotence. Shadows cannot act of themselves. They move only when the substance moves. Likewise, conditions in your life bend when your assumption shifts. The world is not your master. It is your servant, and it serves you faithfully, even if you unknowingly instruct it with assumptions of lack, failure, or fear. Every time you say within yourself that something is beyond your reach, you have given the world its orders, and it obeys. Every time you quietly assume that all things are possible to you, you have written the script, and the stage of life must rearrange itself to display it. When you accept that the world is a mirror, you are set free from the tyranny of appearances. You begin to live from cause rather than effect. You learn to turn inward rather than outward. No longer are you bound by the limitations that your senses insist upon. The doctor may say one thing, the bank another, the world may shout failure. Yet if you close your eyes and assume the feeling of health, of abundance, of triumph, you have planted the seed that the mirror must reflect in due season. The mirror cannot resist. It has no will of its own. The law is exact and impersonal. What is assumed within must be reflected without. This understanding is not an invitation to deny what is seen with childish naivety. It is a call to recognize that what is seen is not final. It is temporary, fleeting, a passing picture of yesterday's assumptions. If the picture does not please you, why fight the reflection? Instead, change the inner image. As surely as the mirror changes when your face changes, life will alter when your assumptions alter. The greatest error is to battle circumstances, for in battling them, you only fix them more firmly in place by giving them your belief and attention. Withdraw belief from the unwanted. Give your attention to the state you prefer, and the mirror must obey. Once this principle is grasped, a new way of living opens before you. You no longer wake each morning waiting to see what the world will hand you. Instead, you approach each day with the quiet knowing that what you assume will harden into fact. Life becomes less about reaction and more about creation. You are no longer startled by appearances, for you know their source. Even in moments of seeming setback, you recall that the world is your shadow and cannot dictate your fate. You stand as the cause, and the cause is your assumption. But assumption is not a shallow thing. It is not a mere sentence repeated in hope. Words alone are powerless unless they are charged with the fire of feeling. This brings us to the next great key. Feeling is the secret. To assume without feeling is like planting a seed without life in it. It will not grow. Assumption must be clothed in the living garment of emotion. You must feel the reality of your desire. You must enter into it as though it were already so, and let the joy of its fulfillment permeate you until you forget the present facts and remember only the inner truth. Feeling is what impresses the subconscious, and it is the subconscious that fashions your world. Intellect may argue, reason may doubt, but feeling moves the deeper self that brings forth creation. When you vividly feel the reality of your desire, the subconscious accepts it as fact, and life responds accordingly. It matters little whether the world calls it possible or impossible. The law does not consult appearances. It consults only your assumption, and assumption is nothing unless it is alive with feeling. Consider the difference between reciting a fact and living it. To say that you are wealthy while feeling poor is to announce words that fall empty. But to imagine yourself in the possession of wealth and to feel the security, the freedom, the joy of abundance until it seems real to you, that is to plant a living seed. The subconscious does not hear your words. It accepts your feeling. If you feel yourself poor, no amount of words declaring otherwise can deceive it. If you feel yourself rich, no evidence to the contrary can sway it for long. The feeling will always outpicture itself. This is why you must not only choose your assumptions wisely, but also nurture them with feeling. Imagination alone is not enough, it must be united with emotion. To imagine health while feeling the relief of being well, to imagine love while feeling cherished and secure, to imagine success while feeling the satisfaction of achievement. This is the practice that transforms. Feeling makes the invisible alive. It is the bridge between assumption and fact. Many will say they try to assume but see no result. The reason is often that they speak without feeling, or they persist only half-heartedly. They let the evidence of the senses smother the feeling of fulfillment. The secret is to turn away inwardly from appearances and surrender fully to the inner conviction that it is already done. Do not strain. Do not attempt to force belief. Simply relax into the feeling of the wish fulfilled, as though you were returning to a place you have always known. The more natural the feeling becomes, the more certain its expression in your world. Feeling is not effortful. It is quiet, deep, and convincing. Imagine for a moment that you are seated in your own home. No effort is needed to feel. This is true. It is natural, undeniable. That is how your assumption must be felt. When you assume and feel it as naturally as you feel where you sit, you have impressed it upon the subconscious. From that moment, it is only a matter of time before the mirror of life reflects it. Do not be discouraged if the outer world does not instantly confirm your assumption. Remember always that the outer is delayed, and delay is not denial. It is simply the process of the invisible becoming visible. The seed has been planted, and feeling is the life that causes it to grow. If you water it daily with the quiet joy of knowing it is already so, the harvest cannot fail. Patience and persistence are not struggles but the steady assurance that the law is working in silence. It is also vital to recognize that feeling can be directed deliberately. Many people believe emotions arrive by accident, that they are victims of moods. But the truth is, just as you can choose a thought, you can choose to dwell in a feeling. You may not instantly leap from despair to ecstasy, but you can gently guide your feeling, step by step, into alignment with your assumption. Begin by imagining small scenes that imply your desire is fulfilled, and allow the emotions to arise naturally from them. As you repeat this practice, the feeling becomes stronger, more natural, more convincing, until it outweighs the contrary evidence around you. Think of a time in your life when you anticipated something wonderful with certainty, a long-awaited meeting, a gift you knew was coming, an event you had planned. Before it arrived, you already felt its presence. That same quality of anticipation, that same inner joy, is what you must cultivate for any assumption you wish to see expressed. Live in the inner satisfaction of it now, and let the feeling be your guide. The outer will come, but the inner must be first. When you master the art of feeling your assumption, you have discovered the true creative power of life. You will realize that nothing is denied you, except by your own unwillingness to assume and feel it real. What the world calls impossible is only what has not yet been dared in imagination and felt with conviction. Every great achievement, every work of genius, every breakthrough began as an unseen assumption clothed in feeling. Those who dared to feel their vision real were the ones who gave it life, and the mirror of the world was compelled to reflect it. The world is your mirror, and feeling is the secret that colors what that mirror must display. If you accept appearances as final, you hand over your power. If you assume without feeling, you plant barren seeds. But when you recognize the world as your servant and clothe your assumptions with living feeling, you awaken the divine law within you. Then nothing is beyond your reach, for you have aligned yourself with the true process by which all things are brought into being. To live in the end is to abandon the question of how and when. It is to bypass the restless reasoning of the mind that insists on processes, conditions, and probabilities. It is to stand boldly in the finished state and claim it as your present reality. The end is the goal already attained, the desire already fulfilled, the dream already made flesh. When you dwell there inwardly with confidence and feeling, you are no longer a beggar of life, but its master. Life responds to conviction, not to doubt. The mind that clings to the end, regardless of appearances, inevitably sees that end unfold in the outer world. The great mistake is to hover in the middle, always wondering what steps are necessary, always anxious about the sequence of events. This is to live in the means, and the means belong to a wisdom greater than your conscious mind. Your task is not to devise every detail, but to assume the end so fully that the path arranges itself. When you live in the end, your inner conversation changes. You no longer say, "I hope it happens," or "I wonder if it will be possible." You say, "It is already so." You carry yourself as one who has already received, and life reflects this inner certainty. The imagination must be disciplined to linger in the result, not in the process. If you wish to be successful, do not think of struggling for success, but of having already attained it. Imagine yourself recognized, respected, and established. Feel the satisfaction of the result. If you wish to be loved, do not imagine the process of meeting or persuading another. Imagine the sweetness of already being cherished. If you wish for health, do not think of treatments or steps. Imagine the relief and freedom of being whole again. The end contains the power, and the end alone must be your dwelling place. This requires a quiet boldness, for the senses will often present evidence that seems to contradict your assumption. The world will display pictures of lack when you imagine abundance, pictures of weakness when you imagine health, pictures of loneliness when you imagine companionship. If you look to these pictures for confirmation, you will falter, for they are but the old harvest of past assumptions. They have no authority over the new seed you have planted, unless you yield your belief to them. To live in the end, you must cultivate the inner habit of ignoring the present facts and remaining faithful to the unseen reality. This does not mean denial in the childish sense of pretending something is not there. It means recognizing that what is seen is temporary and powerless before the conviction of assumption. Just as an actor in rehearsal may walk through the stage before the scenery is complete, so you must walk through life inwardly in the reality of the end, knowing that the outward scenery will be set in place when the time arrives. Living in the end calls for imagination so vivid that the inner scene becomes more real to you than the outer world. Close your eyes and imagine the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Let it saturate you until you forget for a moment where you are. The more natural this inner state becomes, the sooner the outer will conform. You may think this requires effort, but in truth it is restful. It is easier to relax into the satisfaction of the end than to wrestle with the how. When you live in the end, you are relieved of striving. You simply rest in the assurance that the unseen is already accomplished. Now consider the necessity of ignoring the present circumstances. Many fail because they remain fascinated by what the senses present. They say they believe in imagination, but they spend their hours examining the evidence of the outer world. They wait for signs, they search for confirmation, they study conditions, and in doing so, they keep alive the very state they wish to transcend. What you now experience is the result of assumptions long past. It is nothing more than yesterday's harvest. To treat it as final is to chain yourself to it. You cannot serve two masters. You cannot assume a new state while constantly feeding your attention to the old. Attention is the food of reality. What you attend to grows stronger in your experience. If you continue to dwell on what is, you breathe life into it. To starve it, you must withdraw your attention and feed only the inner vision of what you choose to be. This is not easy at first, for the senses cry out with insistence. Yet the more you practice, the more natural it becomes to ignore the temporary and attend only to the eternal. Ignoring circumstances does not mean being careless about life. It means refusing to grant conditions the power of authorship. They are not the source. They are only the shadow. When you remember this, you are no longer intimidated by appearances. A shadow cannot strike you, cannot bind you, cannot dictate your fate. Only the inner assumption has that power. Withdraw belief from the evidence of the senses, and circumstances lose their hold over you. Give belief to your assumption, and circumstances are compelled to change in obedience. Every transformation begins with this refusal to bow to facts. A man who is poor will remain poor if he studies his poverty and reasons from it. But if he ignores it and assumes wealth, feeling the ease of abundance in his imagination, he plants the cause of change. A sick man who continually examines symptoms and accepts them as truth cannot be healed by imagination, for he strengthens the state he seeks to leave. But if he closes his eyes to appearances and imagines the thrill of being whole, the law must bring it forth. The present circumstance is old news. It has no life unless you feed it with attention. The world will argue against your assumption. People may even remind you of your present condition. But if you remain inwardly faithful to your vision, the outer must yield. The law cannot be broken. What you assume with feeling, what you persist in ignoring the contrary, must harden into fact. It is as certain as the rising of the sun. This is why you must guard your inner conversations. The words you speak silently in the chambers of imagination are seeds of reality. If you converse with yourself as though the end were already attained, if you hear the congratulations, if you rehearse the joy of fulfillment, you have aligned yourself with the law. But if you continue to converse from the standpoint of the present facts, you undo your own work. The mirror can only reflect what you inwardly accept. The discipline of ignoring circumstances may seem unnatural at first because the senses are loud and convincing. But remember, they are only reporting the past. They cannot tell you what is to come unless you let them dictate it. To practice this discipline is to reclaim your creative power. It is to rise above reaction and to live as a creator. You do not deny the world. You simply refuse to let it instruct you. You instruct it instead by dwelling faithfully in the end and ignoring all that contradicts it. In time, this practice becomes effortless. You find yourself less disturbed by appearances, for you know they are transient. You become steady, calm, and confident, for your trust is in the unseen cause. When others panic at conditions, you remain unshaken, for you have learned the art of assumption. You no longer live as a victim of what is. You live as the master of what shall be. This is the secret hidden in plain sight. The end is the only true dwelling place. Circumstances are shadows. To live in the end and to ignore the present facts is to live in harmony with the law of creation. It is to plant new seeds and refuse to water the old. It is to walk as though already in possession of your desire, even when the senses scream otherwise. It is to stand still inwardly until the world rearranges itself to reflect the truth you have chosen. Persistence is the great test of faith. To assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled for a moment is simple enough, but to remain loyal to that assumption in the face of contrary evidence is the mark of true mastery. The senses are insistent, the world of appearances is loud, and all around you there will be reminders of what seems real now. Yet this is the moment where the law reveals its certainty. If you persist, if you hold steady to your assumption despite all opposition, the outer world has no choice but to yield. Resistance is not a sign of failure. It is proof that the old state is still echoing in the visible world. Persistence is what outlasts those echoes until they fade and the new state stands revealed. There are many who begin with enthusiasm, imagining boldly and feeling the thrill of their wish fulfilled. But when the outer world does not instantly confirm it, they lose heart. They return to the old assumptions and declare that the law does not work. In truth, the law has never failed anyone. It cannot fail. It is as exact as gravity. The only failure is the failure to persist. Just as a seed planted in the soil takes time to sprout, grow, and bear fruit, so does an assumption require persistence. If the farmer were to dig up his seed each day to check if it was growing, he would destroy it. But if he persists in watering and trusting the process, the harvest is inevitable. Persistence does not mean strain or anxious repetition. It means quiet, steady loyalty to your vision. Each time the outer world contradicts you, you return inwardly to the state of the wish fulfilled. You remind yourself of the truth of imagination and refuse to grant authority to appearances. You hold to your end as if it were already fact, and in doing so, you starve the old reality of your attention. Over time, the power of the new assumption outweighs the lingering shadow of the old, and the transformation becomes visible. There is a peculiar beauty in persistence, for it reveals the depth of your conviction. To persist is to demonstrate that you trust the unseen more than the seen. It is to declare by your actions that imagination is reality, and that appearances are but temporary illusions. Every great change in life has demanded persistence. The inventor who creates a new machine, the artist who brings forth a masterpiece, the seeker who discovers new lands, each must persist despite ridicule, doubt, or repeated failure. In the same way, the one who practices assumption must persist until the invisible becomes visible. This persistence is not only practical, but spiritual. It builds within you a strength and a certainty that no appearance can shake. It trains your mind to rest in the unseen and to withdraw its power from the fleeting world of facts. You learn to walk by inner sight, and in doing so, you discover the profound truth that life bends to the steadfast imagination. Persistence makes you immovable. When others despair at circumstances, you remain calm, for you know that appearances are only the dying echoes of yesterday's belief. You have chosen the end, and you persist until it is revealed. Closely tied to persistence is the law of reversibility. This law explains why assumption works with such certainty. It states that if a cause can produce an effect, then the effect can produce the cause. If heat can make water boil, then boiling water implies heat. If the feeling of success can lead to outward achievement, then the achievement itself must imply that the feeling once preceded it. Therefore, if you can deliberately produce the feeling of the wish fulfilled, you have set in motion the cause that will bring the effect. The law of reversibility is profound because it frees you from waiting on circumstances. It tells you that you need not have the thing in order to feel it. You can begin with the feeling, and the thing must follow. Most people believe they must first acquire wealth in order to feel secure, or first find love in order to feel cherished, or first succeed in order to feel accomplished. But the law declares the reverse: feel secure, and wealth will appear. Feel cherished, and love will come. Feel accomplished, and success will manifest. The outer follows the inner with mathematical precision. This law explains why dwelling in the end is so powerful. The end already contains the feeling. If you imagine the end of your desire fulfilled and feel it as though it were real, you have reversed the process. You have begun with the effect in imagination, and life is compelled to generate the cause in the outer world. You do not need to understand how. The law takes care of the unseen details. Your only task is to enter into the feeling with conviction. Consider how natural this process already is in daily life. When a person remembers a past event, they often feel the emotions of it as though it were happening again. If a joyful memory can recreate joy, and a painful memory can recreate pain, then feeling itself is not bound by time. In the same way, if imagining the end can produce the emotion of fulfillment, then that emotion sets in motion the chain of events necessary to bring the desire into form. The law of reversibility guarantees it. This is why it is so essential to focus not on the means, but on the end. The means are only the necessary steps life must range, and they will appear naturally once the feeling has been established. If you attempt to figure out every detail of the path, you limit the wisdom of the law. But if you enter into the end and persist in the feeling of its reality, the path unfolds in ways often surprising and always certain. The cause is always the inner state, and the effect is always the outer reflection. The law of reversibility also reveals why imagination is creative. To imagine is to feel. To feel is to set in motion causes that will outpicture themselves. When you dwell in the feeling of the wish fulfilled, you have already begun to experience the effect. It is as though you have planted the harvest within yourself, and the outer world must now bear fruit. There is no escape from this law. Whether you use it consciously or unconsciously, it is always at work. If you continually dwell in the feelings of lack, fear, or failure, the outer world must echo them. If you persist in the feelings of abundance, love, and success, the outer world cannot resist them. Persistence and reversibility together form a great key to understanding. Persistence ensures that the feeling is sustained long enough to take root, and reversibility explains why feeling produces fact. Together they give you dominion over life. You no longer wait passively for conditions to change. You create the change by persisting in the feeling of the end. You no longer wonder if imagination works. You know that it cannot fail, because the law is unchanging. When you apply persistence, you overcome the fleeting doubts and appearances that seek to sway you. When you apply reversibility, you bypass the need for outward evidence and generate the cause within. The two work hand in hand. One keeps you steady, the other sets in motion the creative force. With them, you stand in a place of quiet power, knowing that the world must rearrange itself to match the state you have assumed. In this practice, every moment becomes a choice. Will you persist in the old assumption, rehearsing the same tired feelings of lack or limitation? Or will you persist in the new, feeding the seed of your desired end with unwavering attention? Will you wait for life to hand you circumstances so you may feel secure? Or will you feel secure now and let life mirror it back to you? The law is not concerned with time or difficulty. It responds only to feeling, and feeling can be chosen at any moment. Once this truth becomes clear, life takes on a new simplicity. No longer do you chase effects. You no longer beg the outer world to change. You no longer despair at delays or obstacles. You know that your work is within. Your only task is to persist in the assumption and feel it real. The rest is the unfolding of the law, which never fails. Your imagination is the creative power of life itself. It is not a mere faculty for daydreams or idle fancies. It is the invisible workshop where every visible thing first takes shape. What you hold within imagination is not separate from reality. It is the seed of reality. The great error of the world is to believe that imagination is secondary, that it is only a reflection of the outer world. In truth, the outer world is the reflection and imagination is the source. When you imagine, you are engaging in the very act by which creation comes forth. The houses, the cities, the books, the discoveries of science, the works of art that surround you were first invisible pictures in the minds of men and women who dared to assume them. Imagination clothed with conviction is God in action. This is why it is said that you are not a spectator in life, but its author. You may look upon events as though they happen to you, or you may awaken to the knowledge that they are shaped by the images, You have entertained an imagination, whether consciously or unconsciously. The law does not rest. It operates ceaselessly. Every assumption, every image felt as real, sets into motion a chain of events that crystallizes into fact. To recognize your imagination as God in action is to take full responsibility for your life. No longer do you blame others. No longer do you wait upon chance. You understand that to change your world you must first change the pictures you hold within. This power is not partial. It is not reserved for a select few, nor is it limited to certain areas of life. It is the same power that paints the sunrise, that arranges the stars, that gives life to the smallest seed. That power is individualized in you as imagination. You may think it is only personal fancy, yet it is the same creative force that sustains the universe. To imagine boldly and persistently is to align yourself with the eternal source of creation. You need not strain for this power, for it is already yours. It is as natural as breathing. The question is whether you will direct it with intention or leave it to wander unconsciously. Imagination used unconsciously will still create. If you habitually picture failure, rehearse conversations of defeat, or dwell on fears, those images will clothe themselves in circumstances. They will walk onto the stage of your life. For imagination does not distinguish between deliberate use and careless use. It simply creates what it is impressed with. But when you awaken to its nature, when you recognize imagination as God in action, you begin to use it deliberately. You select your assumptions with care, you fill them with feeling, and you persist in them until the mirror of life reflects them. You must never underestimate the quiet power of imagination. It may seem invisible, intangible, without substance, but it is the root of all substance. Consider the artist who imagines a painting before he touches the canvas, or the architect who imagines a building before a single stone is laid. The imagination is the true act of creation, and the outer form is the inevitable echo. When you practice assumption, when you dare to imagine yourself already in possession of your desire, you are calling upon the creative force of God within you. Nothing is too small, nothing too great, for imagination to bring forth. It is not limited by distance, by time, or by circumstance. It responds only to the feeling of the wish fulfilled. This is why silence plays such a vital role. The great mistake is to scatter your assumptions before the opinions of others. When you speak outwardly of what you are imagining, you invite the world to interfere. You expose the delicate seed to the winds of doubt, the mockery of skeptics, the discouragement of those who do not understand the law. Imagination thrives in silence. It grows best in the secret garden of your own inner world, watered by your feelings and protected from the voices of contradiction. To keep silent does not mean suppression or secrecy out of fear. It means reverence for the creative act. Just as a farmer does not expose the seed to harsh weather before it has taken root, so you guard your assumption in quiet until it hardens into fact. The more you keep it within, the more powerful it becomes. Silence multiplies strength. What you continually proclaim outwardly often loses vitality, for it becomes subject to doubt and debate. But what you hold in the sacred stillness of your imagination gains life with every silent rehearsal. There is a reason why the most transformative acts in history were born in silence before they were ever revealed. The poet, the inventor, the mystic, each nurtured the unseen vision in solitude before presenting it to the world. The vision drew its power from that silence. In your own life, the same principle applies. When you keep your assumption within, when you feel it real in the quiet of your soul, you protect it from the corrosive influence of disbelief. You let it grow roots deep within you, until nothing can uproot it. Silence also brings you into deeper communion with the creative power itself. In silence you are not distracted by the noise of appearances. You are not swayed by the chatter of doubts. You are alone with your assumption, and in that stillness you feel it alive. This inner conviction is what brings forth creation. No amount of outer discussion can replace the inner certainty born of silence. The world may demand proof, it may ask for explanations, it may scoff at what it does not see, but you need not answer. Your silence is your strength. The proof will come in its own time, when the invisible becomes visible. This is why it is said that the kingdom of heaven is within you. That kingdom is the realm of imagination, and its treasures are cultivated in silence. When you withdraw from the noise of the world and enter into that inner kingdom, you are in touch with the creative source. There, in the stillness of assumption, you shape the future. There, without announcement, you claim your desire as already yours, and from that silent claim, life takes its direction. It is tempting to seek reassurance from others, to announce your assumptions so that someone might confirm them. Yet true power needs no confirmation. The more you rely on the approval of others, the more fragile your assumption becomes. Silence teaches you to stand alone with your conviction. It teaches you that your inner certainty is sufficient. When you cultivate that certainty, the world must conform. There is no need to argue or persuade. The law does not require public proclamation. It requires only the silent, steady assumption held within. Imagination and silence together form a sacred union. Imagination is the creative fire, silence is the protective vessel. One gives life, the other guards it. Without imagination there is no creation. Without silence there is no endurance. Together they ensure that your assumption matures into fact. When you imagine vividly and feel deeply, you have planted the seed. When you remain silent, you allow it to grow undisturbed. In time the world will see the harvest, and then you may speak if you wish. But by then no opinion can matter, for the fact itself will be undeniable. In this way you come to live with quiet confidence. You no longer need to prove anything to anyone. You no longer need to broadcast your desires or seek validation. You know the creative process, and you trust it. You imagine, you feel, you keep silent, and you persist. This is the rhythm of creation. It is simple, yet profound. It asks only for faith, for discipline, and for patience. And when practiced, it transforms life in ways that seem miraculous to those who do not know the law.